heard Katie's got sharp elbow. We know.
If I can read, thank you.
Are you ready?
It's me, that's you.
Oh, something wrong. I got some food over there.
Hi, everyone. Rainey Tebow, again, Director of Marketing and Communication for the school district. GMA TV has been kind enough to be with us tonight to help live stream this discussion. I will be your mic runner for the evening. If you have a comment, a question, something to say, please wait until I can shuffle over to you to hand you the microphone, because we want to make sure everyone that's watching from home hears all of the conversation. Similarly with our board members on the edge, I'm going to run this over to you if you have a comment or question. Thank you.
So this is an unexpected pleasure to have everybody here tonight. We've done a couple of these meetings already, and sometimes not so many people show up. So I guess one thing I wanted to spell, we're all in this together no matter how you want to slice it. So is this working any better?
Okay, it's not, these microphones are not for the room. They're only for the
Okay.
live stream. Sorry,
Okay.
I should have said that up front. Speak loud.
I guess I can do that. So the bottom line is, folks, from the board to you, welcome. We're looking forward to your input. Anything we can help you out with or redefine, we're going to do that. You'll find that Deb has probably got some new information for all of us. Last time I talked to her, she said there were some things coming down that were a little bit newer. As we all know, the legislature has adjourned. So whatever will be, will be. So this is basically an information meeting. Please ask. Well, here's the bottom line, and I'll say this very openly and very publicly. Right now, the budget that everybody is annoyed about by the $50 drop, that a number of us have heard various feedback from, if you will. Basically what the board decided to do in part, in that paperwork that you have, those are the places, if this budget gets voted down, those are the places that we have the ability to turn the knobs on. In that budget, in that piece that you've also got, you're going to find that the state has a huge representation to what we do. So we turn a little bit of a knob, and that's all we can do. There's some people out there that think, oh, the special ed piece, you can get rid of people. You can get away with programs. Those are all state law. And if you look back on the internet, it's Act 173. It was enacted in 2018. I have several of them I could spout off for you if you'd like. It's all law. We can't do anything to it. So if you want us to cut it, we can't. You have to take and call your legislators, talk to them, the ones that just adjourned Saturday morning, and let them know. Because we can't do anything about it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. We have a few, yeah, we have a few pieces in there that you will see that we can directly cut. When you get your tax bill, those pieces we can cut to make your taxes a little bit cheaper. And Deb can expound on this if she'd like to, but it comes down to $10 or $15 if you want to cut it out. If you want to cut the $3 million out, that basically does away with your elementary schools as we know them, because that cuts a lot out.
In essence, should we break this down here?
Oh, I'm Mark. This right here is the school board, as you can see, and I'm Mark Nielsen.
We didn't hear you, sorry.
I'm Mark Nielsen. I represent. I'm Mark Nielsen. Just,
It's only for the radio, for the TV.
I bet that would really.
They're just for the TV as well.
Well, basically, I'm Mark Nielsen. I represent Johnson on the school board. I'm one of several up here, Katie, a few others that do down this way as well. So if you'd like us to call our names out, we're more than happy to.
Kylie Hill, Johnson.
Monica Stearns Johnson. Katie Orris Johnson.
Patty Hayford, Hyde Park.
Bart Bazio, Waterville.
I'm Jeff Hunsberger from Eden.
David Wickham, Eden.
Lisa Berry, Hyde Park.
Okay, Hyde Park.
Stephanie Sweet Belvedere.
Eleanor Johnson.
Amy Listick, Cambridge.
So basically, you just heard the names of the entire board represented.
Hi, I'm Carol Campbell-Edmonds. I live in Belvedere, and Stephanie just pointed out the lines that refer to the school closing. I have two questions about that. Since it is still under school control, is the town gets to buy it back for $1 thing still open? Or did that, did that expire? Was that for a limited time? And the second one is, what would be the time frame and sort of the process by which residents of Belvedere could have input or have some kind of say about what the building could be used for?
It's kind of a convoluted question. You ever heard of Bill 887? And I'm sure there's a few of you that have. I've got a copy of it up here. I won't get into the whole thing. As I understand it right now, the board's already made a decision to mothball it to Belvedere School for a year. That was in the initial budget as we dropped it. That was $70,000 worth.
So does that mean it's just literally
just sitting there,
secured, and nothing happens?
correct.
Okay.
According to the current Articles of Agreement, when we did the Act 46 deal,
Yeah.
there has to be 2 votes separated by a year in order to close it. And why I bring up 887 is because that could rewrite the way the state does things, period. So I really can't give you a good solid answer on it because there's
Right,
paper.
I know that's not the point of this meeting either, but thank you for at least giving me, that's way more than I do.
Yeah.
I park the car, so.
Hi, I'm Lynn Sibley from Johnson. Can you tell me exactly what you cut with the $50 that you reduced the budget by?
It was facilities.
Pardon?
Facility supplies.
So that's like paper, those types of things.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, these grateful mics here. Curious question, how many COVID-related programs are we still facilitating with the budget putting forth? The food, are we still paying for food as taxpayers for every single student? Isn't that a private school type thing? Don't we have private schools for this type of, I mean, I know that was a COVID thing. Our kids were paying for their food before COVID, but since COVID, it's a miracle. All the food is paid for and everything. It's like, where do we get the money for that? So that's a curious question I have.
It's still, oh, go ahead.
So at the end of last year, the legislature enacted universal meals in schools. So all kids eat without a charge across the state. That's a statewide enacted at the end of last year.
Mike?
Yes.
Of course we do. I'll be the only one. Hey, it's Michael Patch from Johnson. Hey, Rick. Good to see you even here. Hey, a couple of questions I wanted to bring up. I said this before in here quite adamantly. We understand the kids. We all love our kids, grandkids, the whole 9 yards. We're not trying to understand what's going to happen, these cuts and whatever. I look at that as a scare tactic, and I'm going to say one other thing too. I've seen the kids protesting beside the streets, not the little kids, thank God, but protesting against their parents. As I had said before, in the same part of this, parents aren't buying lawnmowers. Parents aren't going on trips. Parents are worried about their taxes. Parents are whatever. And I know it's tough for you guys to understand what I'm trying to say, but I'm sure you're hearing this. But when I saw this $50 in there, I talked to somebody in the school district. I'm sure she was in here. She said she wasn't going to miss the next one. But I was insulted. And I mean big time. And I've talked to a lot of people. That's one thing I can run my mouth. I'm not sure the consequences that you guys do. We're going to know next week. That's for sure. But I asked you guys before, when you did this budget, what is the other plan? What is the other plan? There isn't one. So now we just took $50 off. Guys, really? $50? So if you bought 12 toilet paper rolls at Costco, you spent more than $50. Are you really serious? Serious? In this school, the budget that we've got, this is not about the kids. You're going to say it is. Everybody loves their kids. Nobody's not anti-kids. I said before, we all ought to get together and see what we can do to cut. We have took positions. I'm going to open this one up in here. They used to be 6 months teachers. And then everybody else worked in a summer job. Like a lot of them in my time, they worked for all kinds of different places. They mowed lawns, they did whatever. Now we have to turn around with this increases in it, and you guys are going to say I'm wrong, and it's not a lot of money, but now we have paid teachers, this is their job year-round. And you know how many days they work, just like I do. So if we're going to do this, and this is going to come through in here, I think we ought to go to year-round schools, because you're just paying the teachers for year-round, we're going to keep going. And I'm telling you, you look at the internet and stuff that other states and towns are running into, how can some schools do it for $9,000? How many people watched 60 Minutes 2 weeks ago? Look at those girls in New York, $8,000, 100% placement in college, 100% graduate. Look at them, 8,000, it's right on 60 Minutes. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not anti-school, I'm not anti-whatever, I just think that the people can only afford so much. So when you see some of these numbers that household families of 4 that are in 40 to 60,000, and all of a sudden you're going to have taxes that have just jumped like this, their pay doesn't. Somehow we have to control this to what people's increase in pay is. And I'm not seeing it. And I know I'm going to get beat up when I put this thing down. I can feel it already. But everybody's got a right to say what they want. That's why it is. But I'm trying to say, I don't think there's anybody that I know in this room that's anti-kids or anti-teachers. So I just wanted to make sure that there's nothing not mad, whatever, but we got a problem, and I don't know how to cure it. But you guys didn't do what I asked either. I asked you to come up with another plan in case this didn't go through. $50, you made up my mind on how I'm gonna vote, instantly. And everybody I've told the same thing, it's an insult. And that's just my take, my 50 cents, there you go.
Deb, can you speak about income sensitivity from property taxes?
So households, 69% of the district pays education taxes based on income or income and property. So a very small percentage of the district actually pays full property tax for education. In FY25, it'll be households of 128,000 or less from your 23 tax returns are going to qualify for property tax discounts based on income. A significant number, and in these slides is the data on those paying based 100% on income. They pay 2% of income, and then there's a significant number, 2.5%, and then a very small number actually pay based on, I think it's like 11%, I can look it up if I get to the slide, based on actual full property value and full property tax. You know, there's been a lot of, can I just keep going? Because I think you had a question about $50 and why it was only $50. Without having this discussion right now, the board has to make some assumptions, some really hard assumptions. And these are services that serve your communities, that the knobs that Mark is talking about. And they could have just gone and slashed them, and there'd have been a vote, and those services were in jeopardy. The board really wanted to hear voices, and the way to get you here, right? You came last time, but the way to get you here was to do this and give the community an opportunity, because we also heard that people didn't have time to learn what was in the original budget. They didn't understand the original budget. The cuts, they didn't understand the original set of cuts. And there are no secret expenses that the board has at its discretion. These are some serious questions, and they legitimately and genuinely want to hear from everyone on those things they still can turn the knobs on and what they mean to the communities.
So,
I need to go that far.
so if the board doesn't mind, I would like to respond to Mike. Because Mike, last time you were sitting right over there, and you asked me if there was a plan B. And what did I tell you?
No.
That's exactly right. That's what I told you. When I told you that, these numbers that we're looking at were not available to us. Okay, that's just the way it is. As I typed in the Front Porch Forum, and I was pretty specific about it, do you honestly think that this board would present a Plan A budget when we had a Plan B budget that might just pass? And I think I put a question mark by it. I'm not sure if I used the word seriously or not, but that's what I was thinking. So that's direct response to that. Next comment that I will make has no reflection whatsoever on this board. It has no reflection on the teachers or the administration. A number of us on this board also heard all that feedback about people were insulted by $50. Okay? Just now, if you take a look from our senior most member, David Whitcomb, all the way down to this end of the table, you have a huge talent base on this board. Bart is a certified accountant. That's what he does for a living. Katie sitting beside me is kind of like a budget hawk. She'll question everything. First budget that went through, we got a lot of hours in that budget. It got voted down. So you say, the public says, as we all work together, that you were insulted. We went into the second budget, and we took that one, we took $350,000 out of it. We presented that back to the taxpayers. And that's all of us in this room, they're taxpayers in the area, we all voted on it. All of our taxes are influenced by it. So it's not you versus us, not even remotely, because we're all in this together. So that one got voted down. Now we take $50 off, and now everybody's insulted again. So now we start accumulating the hours that this group right here that I represent, we got all these hours in this budget cutting pieces. The public is insulted by $50. So we vote it down as a public. And don't you think that comment could go both ways? After all the work that we put into it to give you a prudent, as good as we could budget. So then we come back into the third budget that you're going to look at next. That's the $50 off that everybody's pissed off about, and I'll say it right into the screen. We decided as a board, here's the numbers, folks. What do you want? What don't you want? It's that simple. If you decide that you don't like the budget that we gave you is $50 off, you're mad about that, and you vote this one down, this community knows what's coming next. It's right in the paperwork in front of you. Those are the knobs that we have to turn that we can control. Like I said in the very beginning, there's certain knobs that we just can't turn. It's against the law to turn them. So we can't. So that's my overall response. I don't mean to offend anybody or get anybody upset, but I'm being really, really honest, and I don't want my thoughts in any way to influence what you think about my fellow board members who are an extremely talented group of people. And we get down to teachers and the rest, however you want to slice it, we got some really good teachers in this district. Really good. We want to keep them. We heard comments up in Eden when I was up there that, oh, you can do X and Y and this is what will happen. Do you know how long it takes to hire a teacher back? We get 0 to 3 applicants for every job posting. And I had the pleasure with Mr. Manning helping me here. I went down to get a door key one day. The lady left, the lady that he gave a tour to, a potential employee, left. Her next 2 phone calls were to her new employer and to tell David she couldn't accept the job. So that's what we're dealing with, folks. We don't have the pool out there to hire from. We can't hire them if they don't apply. And as we get away from support staff and teachers, we're going to be rebuilding the school district for a long time.
Question here.
Sure.
Beth Foy, I have more of a statement than a question. I'm not sure if this is on or not. But my statement is, for me, it's not about emotion. I'm not mad about $50. I'm not mad about the former cut. I'm really happy with the original cut, honestly. I think that was good financial decisions behind it. I am very worried about hearing about cutting busing and cutting after school programming. I think that potentially impacts the highest vulnerable of our population. So very concerned about that. And I think our problem is a state problem. I don't necessarily think it's a district problem. Our state formula is messed up, and I'm actually I'm kind of sad to not see our state reps here, to be completely honest with you. And I'll probably reach out to each of them and let them know that I'm a bit disappointed. No, they'll get, yeah, I'm not worried about that. But I just want to say that there is a lot of the work that goes into all of this, and I appreciate all of the work that goes into it. And our district, I'm friends with a lot of teachers, and I hear from a lot of teachers who could leave our school districts to go other places and would make easily $20,000 more moving a town or 2 over. So we actually often underpay our teachers in this district compared to surrounding districts. So I just want to make sure that that is known. And again, reiterate, I really think we have a state formula problem, and we knew we had a state formula problem years ago when we knew that this education funding was not going to be sufficient over time, and that's what we're feeling the consequence of right now, in addition to inflation and other factors that have affected everybody. But I'm not convinced we're going to solve this problem here, and I understand the impact on everybody. I understand the impact, Mike. I do. I feel it myself. But I'm not sure it's solvable in this forum. So thanks.
I think I'm pretty loud talking. I'm gonna speak here. I'm gonna set this right here so everyone can hear me on.
I think that's for the TV.
It is. That's still. You can still hear me on there. If I set this down, you really need it up here. All right. Well, I'm gonna take this Slurpee and take a little time. If you guys have a second, I got a little quick story for you. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for being up here for a minute. My gratitude. I had a chance about 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years ago to substitute teach for a couple teachers in Cambridge. I got to see the enormous, freaking huge binder that these teachers that you all put together over the summer and work through the summer. I get it. There's so much going on there. You guys are over inundated. The public, we expect you guys to come up with a budget that meets everybody's personal needs on finances. My wife and I are retired veterans here in this community, in this county, in this state. We don't make a lot of money. I got 80% disability. That's not a lot of money. I didn't know in this state that as an 80% disabled veteran, you have to submit a form every year. And in order to get your homestead tax redemption, we didn't make that last year. I didn't know that you had to do that as an 80%. But if you're 100% in this state, you're good. That paperwork's all done up. We took that hit on the chin last year. $1,800 our mortgage went up by. Now, we didn't have that kind of money to cover. Then you asked us to increase our taxes by property taxes again. We don't have that money to cover. So I'm asking you guys, why can't we break this whole thing down to bare bones? I'm a product of California. I grew up there and got educated there through that penal code educational institution I call. I had after school programs. I was one of those kids, only child. I got to do the after school programs and I got to enjoy every single one of them. Did my mom have to pay out the wazoo for them? Probably not. I don't know how much they actually had to pay in taxes, but I'll tell you, you can go back and forth with the insult to injury, and we can go evil against evil, and evil begets evil, and we can call it insults for $50, but ultimately it comes down to the kids. It comes down to our school, it comes down to the programs that we want. What do we want as a community? What do we want to see our kids do? Where is our school district and our program competing against the entire America right now? Are we number 1, are we number 2, or are we 47th in the entire US with our education system? How about our sports programs? They're great after school programs. How many kids are coming out of here going into the colleges because we're really promoting that after school programs? The school buses, great school bus program, and I commend these drivers. I can't even imagine. I mean, the noises and everything that go on. I can only imagine, but you know what? Get rid of them all. Put it back on the parents that are giving you guys grief for making this budget. Get rid of every single bus and make everybody drive to school. Every single kid, every single day. And I guarantee you're going to see some differences in you guys making the choices for these budgets. You're going to see people coming out of the woodwork saying, hey, we can do something different for this budget. Let's break our school districts down to the schools down to the bare bones. Get the square programs up there. You got your English, your arithmetic, your sciences. Let's get rid of the extra programs for a second. And I'm not saying take them off the budget right now. I'm not saying get rid of them for all the kids that are in need in our school districts. I'm saying let's look at each and every single one of them, because I'll tell you, I have no idea. I'm a 20-year aircraft mechanic. I have no idea about school budgets, but I know when something doesn't seem right, we should speak up about it. We should come together on this stuff, and that's exactly ultimately what every single person in this room is doing. Every person on that camera is watching, whoever is there. We have to figure this out, and we have to do it together. And I'm telling you, we need to break the whole thing down, the foundation, burn it to the ground, start over fresh, because we owe it to our kids and our kids' kids and generations to go, because it starts right here and right now. That's the only way we can do it. Thank you. By the way, I'm JJ Becker. This is my wife, Stephanie Becker, over in Johnson. Apologies for not introducing myself.
May I? Go ahead, please. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that story. I appreciate your perspective on it. I'm Jeff Hunsberger. I've been on the school board for quite a while from Eden. And Eden, of course, is one of the more challenging towns to service, basically because of its rural nature, but Belvedere is the same and Waterville is the same as well. So those of us that are kind of out on the upper fringes of Lamoille have some unique challenges. My child is 17. She's in the high school now. We passed the high school budget. We passed the middle school budget. We passed Green Mountain Tech's budget. What we haven't passed is that elementary school budget. And you are correct. Those elementary school kids are not going to be coached to step outside and hold signs and say, please pass our budget. They're not going to be. That's not appropriate. And it's not appropriate to get them involved in that way. But what is going to happen for those folks, especially our more rural folks, and it's going to affect everybody, is that if we have to turn those knobs, to use this language, it's not the language I would typically use, but if we had to cut transportation, if we have to cut after school programming, then what we're doing is it has a layered effect. It's the old Shrek thing. It's a layer of the onion kind of thing. So you take away transportation, we're going to have less kids making it to school. Elementary school kids. These are the kids who need to be in school. There's a huge number of people in our community, all of these communities, who are living in environments that are impoverished. That's why the initial school food program came online. So for those of us who lived in towns that had a poverty rate of 70-some%, that's why we didn't have to pay for our kids to get food. Now the state legislature has taken care of it, so that issue is taken care of. Kids fed are kids who can learn. If we don't have transportation, we can't get kids to school. It's up to the parents. If the parents are not capable of that, and believe me, there's a large percentage of parents who aren't capable of getting out of bed and getting their kid to school every morning. Is that going to have an impact? Yeah. Is that going to have an impact on the voting public? Yeah. Is that going to have an impact on that particular family? Probably not. The impact is going to be felt by that child or those children in that home. And we have that situation with domestic violence. We have that situation with people and families who are suffering from alcohol abuse, from drug use and drug abuse. We have families out there that are trying to make it, and the only support system they really have is a school. I'm not telling you that that's right. I'm not telling you that's right. I work at the Lamoille Family Center. I run youth and young adult programs. I see what's happening in our children's integrated services programs with kids who have special needs and young people and parents who are living in poverty who need supports. And these parents aren't going to get a lot of those supports if that transportation isn't. It's just another layering it on people who can't afford to deal with it. After school programming is another whole ballgame. Again, we have kids in this. We're not different from you. I mean, we should all be sitting together. We shouldn't be sitting in front of you. We're the same as you. Our property taxes are going to go up too. But if we don't have an after-school program or it's significantly cut back, what are those kids going to do? Most of these elementary schools are closing at 2:20, 2:30 in the afternoon. What's the impact on those parents? We want them to have jobs. We want them to be employed. But do you know what the child care situation is like? Child care is awful. You can't find it, and if you can, you can't afford it. So what we're doing is we're fighting against each other because the legislature hasn't figured out how to get this thing figured out. For lack of using colorful language. It's a mess. It's a real mess. And they did a ceremonial cut or cap at 13-point-some% on Friday. I don't know if that's even applicable to this. But the bottom line is, if we wanted to hand this to you, the public, to weigh these things out, this is your decision. This is our decision together. The $50, I apologize if you felt insulted by that. By law, we had to decrease it by something. And many school districts decreased it by $1. That to me is irrelevant, but I do apologize for the optics of it. But that's not what it was done for. It was done so we could have this conversation with you now, so you can understand the depth of the decisions that have to be made and who they're going to affect. Our young people are going to be the ones who pay the price for it. Yes, we have to pay the taxes. I pay pretty high taxes. I don't have a fancy house and I live in Eden, but I have to pay taxes too, and it affects me. And my kid's going to be out of school in a year, and I'm still going to be paying taxes. I want the kids in Eden, that's 120 kids. 120 kids is the census in Eden. If there's one parent, there's 120 parents. If there's two parents, 240. That's 360 people I feel like I represent here tonight, who are going to pay the consequences for the fact that if we don't pass this next budget, that we're going to have to cut programming that's going to add more problems on the back end that we're going to have to clean up and fix up through all of the social service agencies and neighbor to neighbor, because that's the only way we can do it. We have to rely on each other because none of us make enough money to pay all this stuff. We've got to take it back we got to take the fight away from us and take the fight to the legislature. That's where it goes. It goes to the legislature, it goes to the governor. We can't do much more about it. We can't cut contracts, teacher contracts and positions. They're already firmed up for this next year. It's a union, guys. You just can't make decisions. You just can't say, this is out, this is out, this is out. It's not that simple. We can't do it. The union's there. We can't negotiate the health benefits. They're negotiated on a statewide level. So we get told what they're going to be, and we have to build that into our budget. So we feel almost as helpless, if I could use that word, as anybody else in this conversation. And what we're trying to do is help you understand, as we are trying to understand, what the actual consequences are going to be of the decisions that if this budget fails, who it's going to impact, and potentially how it's going to impact them. And then we need to be prepared to deal with the back end of that and how to clean that up. Because it's not going to be the school district's responsibility to do it. It's going to be mental health. It's going to be Lamoille Health Partners. It's going to be Behavioral Health and Wellness, the Lamoille Family Center. It's going to be the Restorative Center. It's going to be nonprofit agencies that have no money to do the work right now. It's a trickle-down effect. So it's not a political issue in as much as that's kind of the reality. We're not trying to scare anybody. We just want you to know what the consequences are. That's what we try to teach our kids. If we do this, this is a potential for what will happen. So I hope you take that and think about that. However you vote is how you vote. That's your choice, that's your right. But please understand that we take it very, very, very seriously. We love our kids, we love our faculty, our staff, and our administration. I've never worked with an administration that is kid-focused as this supervisory union. And there's not, if we have to start chopping things, it's not going to be comfortable, and we're not going to be happy about it either. Thank you.
Whew, thank you, Jeff. That was a lot of what I wanted to say. My name is Kyle Newsom from Johnson as well. I did not feel offended by the $50 cut. In fact, I felt quite the opposite. I felt heartened that you were standing by your budget and that you felt that you all did everything that you could do to keep programs intact, that's going to keep children educated, that's going to keep families supported, and that is going to have positive long-term effects versus short-term thinking, which is to, slash our elementary school budgets to the point where by the time they get to high school, they're so unprepared for high school that what's the point of passing those budgets the way we did if we're not going to support the elementary school? We have to start with the foundation when children are small, support and educate them there, and move them up sustainably and smartly. So I will say that I was not offended by the $50 cut. I was actually very heartened by it, and I was really glad you did that. I've been reading this Lamoille South's supervisory union's minutes, and they've just slashed $500,000 from their budget, and it is heartbreaking. It is excruciating, the process that they're going through, because they know exactly what you said. Doing what they're doing is going to cost us all in the long term triple the amount or more of what this will cost us because of the back end, because of the trickle-down effect, because those most vulnerable children and the children that aren't vulnerable right now will become vulnerable. So what costs us a lot of money is the social services, the wraparound support, all our jails, all our prisons, that's failing health. That is what costs us taxpayers a lot of money. And I just plead and beg that we all think about the long-term effects of the decision we make with our votes, because it's real and it's really frightening. I disagree slightly. I do think that our elementary children should get involved in this process. We have, in my home, when we have our family dinners, this is the kind of stuff that we talk about. We talk about what's happening locally and statewide and globally, because I think it's important, that they start to get involved at a young age and understand the implications of these decisions. So, I asked my two daughters, I have an 8-year-old in the elementary school, a 13-year-old in the middle school, what do you think we should do? And they quickly came up with a nice little list of things that we could, that they felt the community could do to step up, what their peers could do to step up and make their opinions known. So people on Front Porch Forum in Johnson anyway may have seen that they wrote some testimonials about why they feel having the services and the educators that they have currently at the elementary middle school, still giving them their education and services, how my middle schooler is still recovering from the COVID years. I mean, she, if we didn't have the school counselor here for her mental health, and this is when I do get emotional. If she didn't have the math interventionist, I don't know, but she doesn't know what we would do. It's really, really important that these services are still in place to help support them, because they're still behind and they're still suffering from the COVID years, and that is nobody's fault. That is something that nobody could have controlled, and it's something that they're going to be dealing with for a long, long time. And I'm just so grateful, not just for her, but everybody that has those services available to them, that they're getting it. And that's basically what I want to say, is that this is not just a transaction. This is not just about money. This is about people lives, human lives that are children that absolutely need to have the opportunities to thrive in this world and to have a viable future. And so thank you. Thank you for standing by your budget. Thank you for keeping it intact. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to speak. And on May 21st in Johnson, this is one of their ideas, we are going to have a honk and wave in support of the school budget in front of the Village Green in Johnson from 4 to 6. And they've already started making their signs, and they want to get out there and say, we support this budget, we support this process. So thank you.
Just quickly, can you go one step further with the whole, we need to make this pass now? I mean, I read in the paper, but I would appreciate a clear explanation. You're doing great tonight doing that. There's something critical about the timing of this vote, right? I mean, because my understanding is in Vermont, and I've lived in several other states, it's very interesting, but you just keep voting until you finally pass something. So, therefore, I guess my question is, can you speak to the timeline thing and why this particular vote has a critical time?
Yeah, sure.
So there's in Vermont. So in Vermont, you're right. You keep voting until there's an actual budget. The budget is your operational framework, right? But there's also a recognition that you have to have cash to run schools. So there's 3 statutes that apply right now as they're written, and I'm not really sure what ended up happening on Friday. I've been reaching out to my counterparts to get updated. But there's one that says the state can still send you money. It is 1/4 of the base payment that last I heard was $13,063. And you get that 3 times. You get 3/4 of the base payment, which is over a $4 million cut from the budget that's currently in place. Then there is tax. So the state needs to tax you. They will impose a $1 tax rate. And I did a calculation offhand. I made the assumption it was a penalty tax. I was incorrect. It's just $1, and then you divide it by the number of kids at the elementary, and then you apply your common level of appraisal. And then there is borrowing. You can use 87% of the most recently passed budget for your basis for borrowing. A lot of people say you can borrow up to 87%. Not entirely sure that's correct. You can use it as a basis. So what happens is then you just keep voting until there's a budget, and then there's a reconciliation of all the cash. So if they impose $1 and in December a budget passes, 6 months worth of accurate tax collection has to happen. And then the state has to send excess money or take away money, and the town clerks do all that work. They act as the collector for the state AOE, or the education department. So they do all that work to reconcile. It is a little confusing, but the timing is, if it comes July 1, the state can then impose the tax, and then we have to look at a different borrowing rate, and the cash flow is, potentially 3/4 of a significantly less amount. Plus interest. To borrow.
Thank you. My name is Olga. I'm in East Johnson. So my goal here is then to figure out how can we come together and come up with some solutions, because clearly then what it looks like is there's stuff that's happened at the legislative level that has impacted the way that we're able to function and the way the schools are able to function. So we have to, I'm hoping that we can come up then with some type of a solution, whether it's like a working group of folks that come together and work with you. Is there a way to do like a breakdown of the budget per school, like line by line, where we're really kind of getting a better sense of things, and maybe even figuring out how do we push on the legislation as a district and say, I don't know, maybe we all work together and say there's like 50% of the people of this district that are going to refuse to pay their property taxes or something crazy like that unless you guys come back and, or something, because this is just completely toxic and dysfunctional. One of the things I was trying to look at through here and when I was looking on the website earlier was to try to see an actual breakdown, like per school, like how much in pens, how much, it sounds silly, but as a parent and, head of household, I have to do the budget for the family. Like all of us are here. I had a friend over this morning from Eden, and she said, I was a single mom with 2 kids, and boy, did I know how to budget. And we, you know, and we're all budgeting now because of the economy and how awful it is. So is it something that like we can kind of really look and see, are there things that can be budgeted to a certain degree that, because it seems like the jump is programs to kids. I'm pretty sure there's things that we can look at in a budget that has nothing that's going to impact busing or the actual children, that there's other things that we can look at. One of the questions I had is, where does the funding for the supervisory union come from? Is that separate, or is, you know, because that's you know, there's a bureaucracy, right? So there's administration costs and all of that. Is that coming from this pool, or is that coming from a different pool? And then I'm hoping maybe we can come up with some type of a solution leaving here. I'd love to see like a working group of us working together with you to try to figure out how do we present something to our legislature to undo the damage that they've done. Because it's not an us versus them, or even some of us who are like, vote no as a way to kind of push this, keep pushing this, versus vote yes. We all want to see the best outcomes. I too have conversations with my kids. I'm a homeschool. We get together and have homeschool gatherings, and you know, some of their solutions are, you know, there should be school choice in Vermont where parents get money to educate their kids and use the funds that, you know, we're paying into to fund the programs that they're going to use. But I don't know if we're ready for that conversation yet. I thought I'd have that.
Hi, it's Lynn again. I've been coming to these meetings now for a number of years, and my issue has been the sustainability of these budgets. It is troublesome to me that being a taxpayer in Johnson, that we discuss this budget, but we never look at the loss that Johnson has experienced since the July flood. We're losing property taxes. Our second major property tax funder is gone. Several houses are gone, and it just seems like something's missing, that there's a void. I feel like at times people are out of touch with those of us who live on those back roads. By the way, the bus doesn't come up my road. People who live on my road have to drive their kids back and forth. And I'm not saying I agree with that, but that's a reality. I don't know what is going to happen in terms of, if the budget passes the way it is this year, what's going to be different about next year? And with Johnson having reduced property taxes, and if those of you read Richie Westman's article about the grand list being sufficiently lower next year, that article was in the transcript. News and Citizen, sorry. I'm a little nervous speaking publicly, but I have concerns. I have concerns that we're going to be right in the same place next year. And David Whitcomb, you were on the board when I was here, and you have the experience to know what it's like to have a school system have budgets turned down repeatedly. I don't know if I'm just too much older than all of you that you don't remember busloads of taxpayers coming and repeatedly turning down the high school budget. And it didn't just happen for 1 year. We ended up having to lay off teachers. We had to make program changes. And the administrators at the high school got a 1% raise for years. And so did the support staff. Those who weren't under contract were given very small raises. And I'm concerned about the sustainability. I just don't see how we can continue to do this and then do it all over next year.
Hi, Julie Gates, Eden. I have two questions. The first one would be about the after-school programs and how this budget affects that when funding comes from state subsidy and parents pay for those programs as well outside. And then my second question is, you talked about how we can't lay teachers off because they're under contract. Why are we having teachers or support staff sign contracts for a budget year that hasn't been set yet?
So the contract part, those are negotiated over time, and the current contracts were negotiated 2 years ago. So there's no changing the timing on reduction in force is what you're referring to. And different districts have different codicils on that, different approaches. As far as the after school and the subsidy and the parent fees, we have two different types of after school programs, and I can't get into the programming. Maybe someone else here can talk about the actual programming. The funding mechanism, the subsidies are only for the licensed sites, not the unlicensed sites. And parent fees, I think with the ESSER funds, and someone can speak up if I'm wrong, had for quite a while, there was no fees. All kids got to attend because the ESSER funds said as long as you don't charge anybody, you can use these funds. Well, those are going away. We do have a 21C grant, but it only pays for so much. There's also some local support that's built into the current budget, a small amount of local support. And that helps fund kids that can't afford, whose parents can't afford to pay. So when we talk about cutting, there's some grant money, there's just not as much funding as what's been there recently in the last 4 years. So there'll be changes to the programming that need to be made if those funds are cut.
That answer your question?
Well, I mean, eating meat, parents pay for, you know, the after-school program and those subsidy that can be. So I guess it answered some of the after-school, but so are you saying that the programs that are licensed that do get subsidy, they will still continue to function, or are you going to?
They may be able to. I don't really know. I mean, I can't give you definitive right now, but it will change the availability of slots for certain kids or all kids or.
Well, you're still on the microphone because I'm going to ask you the question.
But you need to be heard.
I know. Is there specifically anything in any of these budgets that was created either as a position or a program or a subsidy under ESSER funding that is still in existence in these budgets? Any single item at all that has not been discontinued?
So there are 3.5 positions, and it's in these slides. I recommend that you pick them up, and if there isn't a spare one, we'll get you a copy before you leave. There's 3.5 positions for supports and counseling, and the principals can tell you what they're doing, that were felt to be vital. Hyde Park eliminated another position in order to carry forward theirs. And then in the cuts that were made for the 357, there were 3.5 positions eliminated in order to not have to eliminate those other 3 because they're considered vital. They're direct student supports, their intervention, their counseling. So there's been a swap out. So the short answer is there's no extra money going in. There's been positions eliminated in order to accommodate positions that were, right, but there's been other positions eliminated to make room for those. Does that make sense?
So here,
So it's a net zero change.
You're suggesting it's a wash
So-
financially, but not staff-wise positions, actual programs and positions.
There's 3.5 positions eliminated, 3.5 positions added.
Identical?
No, different services. Because these services that were being provided were felt to be so vital, they needed to stay. Others were moved out of the way. Does that make sense?
So the others were not as vital. Correct. Okay.
Deb, I'm going to share these numbers
Thank you. That's
to be updated. So here's some numbers, because I've had this question asked to me a number of times, and we've been keeping track of it as a board just to know what we're talking about. Total staffing, 2023, 471 employees, 223 teachers, 247 support staff. I'll put in a huge plug for all the employees we've got. We got a good staff. We got the best we can possibly imagine. So we back them. 2024 staffing, total staffing, 402 employees, 214 teachers, 189 support staff. So if people want to reduce staff, I think we're well on our way, like to the tune of 60 plus employees.
If I can also add, there was an ESSER position, I think it was an ESSER position, that the diversity, inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yep.
That position's cut, and that position, they will be wrapping up their role here at the end of this school year. So they will not be moved forward. And that's really unfortunate, because there's enormous amount of work that's been done with students and with faculty to try to increase, to be more inclusive, more supportive of youth all across the board with that. And I'm not sure how we're going to be able to move on with that programming. It's going to be, there was a lot developed with that, and I'm not sure how we're going to be able to support it. So, but that's a loss as far as I'm concerned.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. My name's Bill Moore. I'm a taxpayer in Eden. So I'm glad that we had that conversation about the support staff. I do research and writing on legislative activities within education, healthcare, and several other categories. So I've been following 887, this bill, this major failure, I should say, and those are the words of both Senator Cummings and Senator Brock. So that's a bipartisan answer to your question about 887. They have failed to do basically anything for us in the wake of 2 budget failures across 30 some odd districts. They have changed nothing. They failed to adopt spending caps. They failed to adopt differing revenues that would have substantially lowered the yield, which is what dictates your tax bill itself. They're going to brag to you that they lowered it from 18% increase down to 13.8. You're going to hear that. But they also know, and this again, Senator Cummings, Chair of Finance in the Senate, that we're going to get beat up pretty good because that's all we did. She's ashamed. And a lot of them have said, we're ashamed of the bill. We're ashamed of what we didn't do. The earliest report from a study about the bottom line dollars and cents financing of the education fund will not be available at an interim report in January of 2025, the final report in January of 2026, with likely legislation, quote unquote, recommended in next January. As you all know, as board members, January doesn't mean much to a board process because you're already well into the next fiscal year's budget. Right. So we are already, basically tonight, no matter what we do tomorrow with the vote, or when the vote comes, excuse me, no matter what we do, up or down, we are starting a budget process for fiscal year 27, literally, because this is really this is going to dictate what 26 looks like. This bill, because they failed to do anything. The history of this thing is not a history of failed school boards. It's not a history of bad teachers. It's not a history of too much administration, although there's some argument that less administration could be achieved with efficiency. And you can argue about whether buses need to be busing people from the outskirts or whether you could do nodes. You can argue about school lunches. You can argue about support staff. But one thing you can't escape is that the legislature has, since before Act 60, been failing us over and over, kicking a can down the road. Now, the can they kicked down the road this year was our 2 budgets voted down. They looked at it and they said, let's kick that down the road a little farther. They literally said that to you. They said, we'll deal with you in 26. Now, I'm not insulted by the $50, but I'm insulted by that. I'm saying all that to tell you this. We had a conversation at the last information meeting. It was a great conversation. I said, we're sending a message. Most of you agreed that we had the attention of the State House, the attention of legislators. We do. I'm not disputing that. But apparently, it's like at the end of class when the kids start falling asleep, and you can wake them up, but you can't make them think, right? It's 10 minutes to 3. You can wake them up, but you can't make them think. And we're at that point with the State House. They are not acting. And in the end analysis, there is going to be a veto. It's already been promised on this bill that they failed to act with. There's going to be a session on June 17th, and no less than, again, I'll beat up on Senator Ram-Hisdale and Senator Cummings and Senator Brock, and even I think Senator Westman said something. We're going to have this failure right on our desks at the veto session, and we can try to do something more substantial then. So what I'm telling you is you've got their attention. You've woken them up a little bit. They're going to be back in session on June 17th. And if they hear a whole bunch of school budgets passing, they will do nothing. They will not act. They will continue and brag about their studies. So yes, I am voting no, and I'm not doing it to hurt kids. I'm not doing it because I want to live on 87% or 75% or whatever the number ends up being. The bottom line is we can't afford this anymore, the way it's being funded. And we're not in charge of that. We gave up the Australian ballot. We let them steal the property tax from us back in Act 60. We let them steal local control over our school boards. These folks are controlled by Vermont statute largely. Their hands are tied, and they do the best they can within that framework. But it's a brutal structure, and it's got to be. I would never do your job. I've gone on long enough. Obviously, I'm voting no for my own reasons. But what I'm telling you is, you turn around and look at that camera when you speak next, if you speak tonight. Because those legislators are out there, because they're clearly not here again. And that's not okay. We have to send them that clear message. And if we have to turn around in the end of June and warn another meeting, if we have to turn around in June and come up with a budget that's 96% of this one, or God forbid, 87%, that's what's going to have to happen. And it's going to hurt, and we're going to need a group, like Olga said, of people who gather around this school board and figure out a way to make this less of a hell than it's going to be. Because those people have not stood at the gates. And this tax demon is right at your door. So tell them again, one more time.
So I'll be next. So here's my question to you. You obviously have quite a background. And, okay. So I don't see personally, because I'm going to vote, you and I are going to vote each other out of the race.
Cool.
Okay. The one thing I'm trying to figure out is, in my job, and I won't get into what I do for a living, much different than what you do, I tend to follow the money. And I'm trying to understand what the end game is of all of this. And you may know the answer to that because I've been looking and I don't know. If you continuously vote budgets down, I hated accounting when I was in college. I thank God for Bart and Deb. I would like to have somebody, and I'll be asking this question, and obviously I'm in the microphone. It's going to cost us, the taxpayers, if we keep on voting budgets down and then we go 87% and we borrow money and the rest of this. Who's benefiting from all that money that we're spending? Because basically it comes down to where, if you follow the money, I'm not sure where it's leading yet, but somebody is making out like a bandit for taxing the life out of everybody in the state of Vermont that doesn't have a budget. Because believe me, I congratulated the Ways and Means Committee for wasting their time. I sent that to the Ways and Means Committee, and I've sent several other letters. Thank you very much. I appreciate you not doing anything. So I have been involved.
So I'm hoping I'm not out of line by trying to answer your question. I think you wanted really to see if I have some vision for that future. Did any of this board hear about the default budget option that was briefly discussed in the House Ways and Means Committee?
Yeah, it's a page and a half long, and it died
Yep.
because it wasn't financially feasible.
Well, I think it died because the political pushback was so harsh.
Right.
I understood why, because it fits with, this was an attempt basically to say after 3 budget failures, budget would be calculated under statute and put in front of this board, and this board would be placed in the uncomfortable position of usurping the ballot vote and voting up or down on a budget dictated by statute. And of course the outcry, and part of my outcry was, you put these people in that position, they're all gonna walk out, nobody's gonna want the job now, they don't want it, so they're all gonna quit. But I said that to say this. The bottom line is, you're right, every dollar we don't spend, if we're below the statewide average, after you do the long-term weighted average daily memberships and the CLAs and all the things that they do, at some point we cut our budget and that money just still goes in, we still get taxed, and it floats off to some other town, to some other district. Does anyone in the room think that's completely fair? Now, we all agree we want to help out those less fortunate through an income sensitivity and all these other things. But if we're frugal and we do what you're talking about and we get to a 97% budget and 2.5% of that we still have to pay for, and it goes to Winooski or to wherever, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to pick on Winooski, that's not fair. But we need to break the system that is rigidly a cost sharing system and create a system that is a hybrid between cost sharing and a meritocracy for responsible fiduciary management of school budgets. And right now, the balance is in the cost sharing side, and the meritocracy for fiduciary responsibility has been obliterated. So if I think I've answered your question, the formula's broken, it's been broken, it has to be trashed and rebuilt, and they refuse to do it until you keep telling them.
Because you touched on something that I think, and it's in these slides, and I think it's valuable.
Yeah.
So what you touched on, and Lynn, what you touched on earlier with the loss of properties. So the property tax piece of the general, or the education fund, is based on the grand lists. So in the modified unified districts, the grand lists, the residential property tax only pays 22% of the budget. The rest of it is paid by the rest of the state, what you were just talking about. So another way of looking at that, every dollar cut, you're saving 22 cents, but you're leaving 78 cents for someone else and another district. So I don't know how else to say that, I think that's it. So it is, the cost sharing, the way it's set up is so that all students get an equitable education across the state, so that those districts that have don't spend all their money on education, and those districts that don't have are stuck, right? It's shared equitably. It's all raised on the grand list, the property tax. There are some towns that have grand lists greater than their budget needs. So their taxes go into that ed fund and then get distributed to other districts. In the modified unified districts, 22% of the actual budget is paid by residents. The rest is non-residential tax. And the other items, the sales tax, the lottery, all the other little taxes, right? So it's just another way of looking at what you were talking about. For every dollar cut, you save 22 cents, but you're giving 78 cents to the rest of the state, or leaving 78 cents for the rest of the state.
Hi, my name's Eric Hutchins. I'm a teacher here at the high school. Our budget here passed. I want to thank everybody for all their comments. It's clear that there's a lot of people here that are really interested in the success of kids and success of these schools and in their tax rates. I think Bill made a lot of good points in that this is not a budget problem. This is a political problem, right? Montpelier has made a lot of decisions about the CLA, about the way the income is distributed. A whole lot of things have happened this year that have made tax rates go up. That hasn't happened at this board level, right? This board, we're talking about voting down a budget to send a message to the state. I don't think that's responsible. That's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, okay? What we're voting on the 21st, folks in this district, is a school budget, the one made by these people. And I can tell you, a lot of that budget is out of their hands. There's federally mandated special education programs. There's money already tied up in negotiated contracts. I know because I've been part of the team that negotiates the contracts with many members of this board. And if you think that they're spendthrifts and that they're wasting your tax dollars, I got news for you, okay? These folks are very vigilant with every single tax dollar spent. And if you don't believe me, as a active member of the teachers union who wants us to increase teacher salaries to keep and retain more teachers here, go to any district in this state, go to the webpage, go to lnsd.org, and scroll to the bottom and click on employment. And in our district, you will see 40 vacant positions today, May 13th. When I started in this district 13 years ago, that would never happen. The position I applied for here 13 years ago, there were over 100 applicants for it. Okay? The same position went up last year for another member of our department. We didn't have 10. Half of them didn't have licenses. And we interviewed 4 of them, and the first 3 turned us down to go to higher paying districts. We got very lucky. The 4th guy is a much better teacher than he is an interviewer. But that's the reality now, right? So 80% of these budgets are compensation and salaries. And the ones we have here, I would say they're too low, personally. But it used to be, what was fair. When we talked about, years ago, there were 1% increases every year. 15 years ago, I think we even took a 2% cut here one year. There was a day when you could afford to do that. But now there's something, and it's nationwide, and everybody knows about it. It's called a teacher shortage. And this is supply and demand. This is capitalism. If you're going to staff your schools with qualified individuals, then you have to have competitive contracts. And that's what most of this budget is. And these folks who I've negotiated with over the years have been more than responsible with your tax dollars to make sure that we can hire people that are qualified, but also be responsible to the taxpayer. It's a lot of hard work that goes into these budgets. And another thing, I keep hearing people saying that they're for the kids and they don't want to hurt the kids. And I believe you when you say that. When you're talking about burning it all down to send a message, that's gonna hurt kids. People aren't either for or against kids. These tax dollars for education are an investment in your kids. And you can invest a little bit or you can invest a lot. That's a choice all the taxpayers get to make. But there's consequences for that. It's not just for the kids that happens, right? What happens when you have a district that invests in their kids, a lot of money in their educations? Those kids are successful. They get an education. Maybe they go to college. They go into the military. They get a career. What happens when you can't invest in your school systems? When you have to cut busing, when you have to cut after-school programs? That doesn't mean their grandparents are going to drive them to school. That means a lot of kids aren't going to come to school, and they're going to drop out, or they're going to fall behind. And what do you think happens to those kids? Do they disappear after that? No. You'll hear about them. You'll read about them in the News and Citizen. Maybe in the police bar, hopefully not in the headlines. Okay? That's what happens when you don't invest in kids. They will not go away. You will pay later. And we know it's true. There's data about it. Kids that get an education, kids that go to after-school programs, kids that go to school 99, 100% attendance, not 50% attendance, they have outcomes that we can measure. And those outcomes are college, they own small businesses, they contribute to their communities, they pay taxes. And when you don't invest in those kids and they drop out or they can't get to school, you pay for them. You know, another thing, that on the statewide level, there are districts where this conversation about cut it to the bone might be applicable or burn it all down. In contrast to the rest of the state, our enrollment numbers are going up. Enrollments across the state are down. Ours are up here. We have less employees for more kids than we did before. This is not the same district as districts that have spent too much money, that have kept all these programs from ESSER funds or COVID funds, right? This is a different district with a very responsible board and a community that cares about their kids. And I've heard people say, well, the only way to send a message to Montpelier is to vote no. It is definitely not the only way. I'm a civics teacher. There's lots of ways, and that is not even a good way, okay? Call your legislature, they'll talk to you, write a letter to the editor, write the governor, protest, okay? But voting down school budgets is just hurting these institutions and these kids, and it's not even going to lower your tax rate. We've already passed the tech center budget, we've passed the high school budget, we've passed the middle school budget. All that money by statute has to be in the budget. The things you can cut aren't going to be a 20% break on your taxes. If you want to cut that kind of money, you're going to have to close schools. And if you want to close a school, that's a years-long process. Anybody want to volunteer to close a school in their town? Get that process started? Because if you want a 25% reduction in their elementary school, that's what it'll take. I don't think anybody wants that. But you're not going to nickel and dime this down to a 15% reduction. They did what they could. That's why they issued the second budget. I urge folks to vote yes on this budget. If you vote no on it and we have to borrow the money, it's going to cost more for the same level of education going forward in the future. If you want to send a message, there's lots of better ways, and I encourage you to do it. And I understand that people who are frustrated. You're frustrated with healthcare costs, frustrated with inflation, you're frustrated with the rising affordability of everything, and this is the one thing that you think you might be able to control, but you're not going to have the impact that you want to have that way. Thank you for your time. Good luck.
That was actually a good segue because Belvedere School is going to be temporarily closed. And that's why I'm here. Because I don't have little kids, I have grandkids in school. So, and they're not in Belvedere, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter whose kids they are. I think that that's a bigger deal than you might think, and it's happening now. That's not going to happen. That is in this budget. Now I know that. I've come and I've seen it, and I've also seen why. I've been looking through this. This is an excellent budget. It's actually a lot clearer than the ones that I remember working on in South Burlington when I was on that school board. So, well done. Wow, I can read this. You know, it's not a lot of geek speak. But I think what I'm saying is that's already happened, and to say we have to break it further, I'm not in favor of that. I think that we need that school at some level, whatever level, and what I heard tonight is I have hope. They said, if things turn around, so let's turn things around. If you stop funding things, you're only going to make it worse. And, you know, I used to wonder, actually, when you live in South Burlington, you don't understand buses, right? Because everything's 10 minutes away. Out here, I mean, you need to have transportation that's reliable, that's gonna get your kid there in a blizzard sometimes. So it's a different thing. And I think that you're right, people vote down school budgets because they feel like and you do, you have full control. Voters have control. But that's not the control, I do not personally believe that will change one single state representative's mind. I just don't. It's gonna take something a lot better than that, and you can run for office if you've got better ideas. But I admit I did not look at this till you handed it to me tonight. It is online, and so I will be telling everybody in Belvedere, you know, what I learned this evening, either from Porch Forum or just talking to them. But I think that a lot of the answers to those questions are right here. You do have to take the time to read it. And having been on a board, there were so many meetings I used to sit on that side of the table and say, oh, we just talked about that last time, if you were just here. So I get it, okay? And for the person that comes all the time, good for you, that's really helpful. I think I have to say again, I don't want that school to close. I think it means more to a community than just where the parents go. It's where we have town meeting. It's got a lot of history in it. And why would you want to get rid of that? I don't. So we'll see what happens. You know, things change.
Are there other voices we haven't heard from yet, since I control the microphone at the moment?
I thought I was done, and I appreciate the opportunity. I really do, because as a civics teacher knows, you only get so many people who can fit into 3 hours at town meeting or whatever the meeting is, so thank you. But I want to point something out. It's really important, and I know you didn't mean it this way, but nobody said anything about burning anything down. Nobody ever used that kind of jargon or bombast, so I don't appreciate the sentiment. But more importantly, your points and all of the points that we've heard about the contracts being fixed, the momentum of the cycle, the budget cycle, the fact that if you cut your budget responsibly, you won't necessarily save on your property tax bill. All of these are great arguments for why the legislature has failed, because what they've done is created all of those imperatives for us to fight about amongst each other. We are being threatened. Your points are all valid. Your points are all valid. Most of the points I've heard about the lack of effect of turning a budget down, most of those are true mathematically, budgetarily, but this is the system they've created so that we fight amongst ourselves and we use their own veiled threats within the statute to defeat our own imperatives to cut costs or to be more efficient. We're afraid to turn this budget down. If we're afraid to turn it down, it's not because it's a bad budget, and it's not because we're angry for no apparent reason. It's because they've created a system that puts us in a corner. And you just described the corner very well. Thank you for making that argument. They've left us with little else. And I love civics. I'm a political science major, class of '88, down the hill here. I'm telling you that this local system is broken, and they built it, and we need to break that, and we need to have them either give up control to some level to us again, or they need to write it better so that it works and it doesn't create these cost-driving curves, these ramping up curves. We need to break a little bit of the monopoly over the one union, one state teacher contract. There's going to have to be some change there. Doesn't mean breaking the union. It means there's going to have to be some address there. But if they keep refusing to do it, and we keep making their arguments for them, it's self-defeating. We're giving up local control because they forced us into a box and scared us into little rabbits, unwilling to send a hard message.
You saying you for a statewide teacher contract?
What's that?
You for a statewide teacher contract?
I'm not going to address you directly. It's not the way this meeting works. I talk to you afterwards if you want to. Sure.
That was kind of insulting. I'm not a rabbit.
Yeah.
At all, ever. So thank you. To you, think about the fact of closing the after-school program down. How many parents have children that are under the age of 12? That have a 12-year-old and have maybe an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old that's coming out of kindergarten? Parent works till 6 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock at night. Who takes responsibility? Because number one, they can't afford the taxes. Number two, they can't afford daycare. So who's gonna watch their kids that are 5, 6 years old? A 10-year-old? Seriously? Broken budget, broken system? You better figure out a different way of fixing it than just keep turning down a budget.
If we don't fund social services through the school ed fund and put them where they need to be, then we won't have these problems.
You?
You're addressing me directly, and I'd ask that you, the chair,
Okay.
stop that. Nope, addressing each other directly.
Okay.
That's not what we're here for.
Is there anybody else that has a comment in reference to the budget? If there are no further comments in reference to the budget, 7:36, we're done. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.